As an entrepreneur, public speaking can be a valuable skill to have when pitching your business to investors, presenting at conferences or events, or networking with potential partners and customers. This episode addresses guidance and insights to become a better public speaker.
Our Favorite Tools for Entrepreneurs podcast addresses tools and concepts that are useful for the launch and growth of entrepreneurial ventures. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Professor Palin. How are you?
Doing very well. How are you doing today?
Fantastically. Well, we've got together today to talk about the hot button issue of public speaking. I've been told many times that it's the greatest fear in America.
I've always looked at it from a perspective of if you're going to a funeral, someone would rather be in the coffin than give the eulogy. That's how afraid they are of public speaking, because it's the number one fear, and dying is something like number 4 or 5.
Exactly. I'd like to see if that's true in practice, but people are definitely scared of it, that's for sure.
Yes.
I think both you and I relish public speaking.
Yeah, I find it very comfortable. But I must admit, when I was young and in college, I was not comfortable in public speaking. It was something that I developed over my career.
Interesting. I've always thought it accessed my adrenaline junkie side. The excitement factor of giving a public speech is exciting for me. I've really always enjoyed it.
I forget the exact data points on this, but it's something along the line, if you speak adequately, you jump in front of 80% of your peers, just adequately, which is very telling.
And I know you place a lot of emphasis on public speaking in your courses.
Absolutely. What usually helps people get over the fear is when you walk up in front of that room, everyone's cheering for you to be well. No one's saying, I hope they suck, or maybe a few people are, but they want you to do well.
Right.
And most people in the room are just happy it's not them in front of the room.
There we go. The other thing that a lot of people don't think about is it's a very practicable skill. Learning how to public speak is actually a very approachable thing. Most people get caught up with they've never had the opportunity to do it in the past. So the one time they're getting asked to do it, it sort of feels like the first time they're ever doing it.
Unless you are a professional at this, say a politician, I don't know if professional and politician should go in the same sentence, but where you have to be very polished. That's where people make a mistake that are just casually speaking is they try to be that polished speaker. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. I would totally suck if I tried to do that. The technique that I use is I'm speaking to the audience just as I'm speaking with you one-on-one. I'm just being myself. Mm-hmm. When I'm trying to be more professional in something that I'm not, it comes across as artificial and clunky. But by being myself, that's easy. That's very natural.
Making it conversational, right?
Yes. To me, that's the key of someone, unless they want to become a professional speaker and are really working at honing the art. But if you're occasionally giving a speech, just be yourself and speak to the audience.
My key, and I know this is definitely not what everybody does, so don't anybody listening that's have public speaking experience, don't jump down my throat, is I don't like to write the full text of a speech. I like to write bullet points. And the reason I do that is if you write the full text, you have the tendency to memorize that text. And if you stumble in any way, you're now lost. You don't actually know what you're talking about. So I like to write the bullet points and rehearse those so that if I stumble, I know what the next topic or bullet point is, and I can continue going on.
I do the same thing. As a matter of fact, I was at an event in Spain. I think I was speaking for MIT, and they were introducing me as I was writing down the bullet points for what I was about to say. Now, I had formulated it in my mind, so I knew what was there, but it was hectic finishing out some activities at home, getting on the plane, flying out. The time I had to sit down was while they were introducing me. And I walked off the stage and someone said, that was an incredible presentation.
There we go. And that mental preparation probably went a long way.
One of the things, if you haven't done a lot of speaking, I would say prepare. And again, many people have said to me when they've asked me to go speak just off the cuff, and they're always surprised that I'm able to speak on the topic. But truly, I've been preparing for 30 years.
Right. That's exactly right. Another big practicing tool that helps is the looking at yourself in the mirror. I always thought that was weird when people would tell me to do that in the past. And I think the emphasis on it is staring at yourself in the mirror when you're talking is uncomfortable. So it's just practicing something when you're uncomfortable.
One of the things I like to do also is I like to know who I'm speaking to. I want to know my audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can address my comments specifically on the audience, and specifically when I'm speaking internationally. Like, for example, I use humor when I'm starting off. If you're not funny, don't try to do that because it can cross really badly.
Right.
But before I will tell some humorous story or tell a joke in another country where it's not my native language, I will tell it to 4 people of that country to see if it resonates with them, because there are cultural distinctions.
Yeah. Input a small colloquialism and the joke doesn't make sense anymore.
I had a story where I think I was referring to donkeys. And I was talking about someone riding a donkey, and people were looking at me like, I don't understand. Well, the word I should have been using was burrow.
Yeah.
So if I hadn't spoken to natives, it would have gone across flat. When I interchanged the word burrow, they thought it was very funny.
That's a great example.
Before I walk on the stage, if I know no one, if I have an opportunity to intermingle with the crowd, I'll go up and just say hello to a few people in the front row. In essence, making a relationship with them. And then if I get uncomfortable, I can look over at someone and they're going to smile at me because I've made a brief relationship, and that tends to be more relaxing. Also, the very first thing, when I walk on a stage, you see people walk out. They're so nervous. They start speaking before they hit the microphone.
Yeah.
I would advise anyone, the very first thing you do, walk up to the microphone, look up at the audience and smile. You totally engage the audience, because if you smile, they smile.
Right.
And then you can jump into the presentation.
The approachability aspect of it. I like that a lot. I know in presentations, one of your big lessons is readjust the room, center
Yes.
the room on you somehow. And that's sort of the equivalent of doing that in a public speaking setting. Make sure the attention's focused on you, disarm everybody, and then start.
When I start speaking, and I advise anyone to do this, give the audience immediately a reason to listen to you.
Sure.
Now, I will use a story, some humor to do that when I'm speaking. But if you're not funny, do not try that. There's nothing worse than that.
I am not funny. I do not do that.
So I use the technique of an impact statement, which is also referred to as why should they care?
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be some data point on some reason for them to listen. I was speaking about social entrepreneurship, and I was using a reference to business that I created that identified and tracked lost dogs. The first words out of my mouth before I even mentioned my name was that in the United States, a woman with a dog and a grandchild will spend twice as much money on the dog than they will the grandchild. Americans are crazy about their dogs. And just that data point, people are really, okay, what is he going to say next?
Mm-hmm.
And there are different types of issues you can use with data to give the audience a reason to listen to you.
Public speaking 101 for structure of the speech is intro and summarize what you're saying, lay out the points you're trying to say, and then exit and summarize what you have said. And I always go back to that. I think it's hyper effective. You risk losing people throughout the middle part. So people will still leave the speech with, oh, I know what he was talking about, which ultimately is the goal if you're presenting something in any form.
Yeah, that's the tell them strategy.
Okay.
You tell the audience what you're about to tell them, then you tell them, and then you conclude by telling them what you just told them. So you're repeating it 3 times. It's called the tell them strategy.
Perfect. I always default back to that. And I think it is hyper effective.
Other issues that I would suggest is don't rush, speak calmly, because I know when you're nervous, you tend to speak faster. But for anyone that's nervous, there's an interesting technique they can use also. If you're at a podium, grab the sides of the podium and squeeze very hard. If you're not, put your hands behind your back, grab your index finger and squeeze very hard behind your back. By squeezing, the tenseness goes out of your body into your hand squeezing, and you appear relaxed.
Is that right?
Try it. It works.
You learn something new every day. I've never heard that one before. That's good. Every time I see somebody doing that, I think they're trying to stop themselves from passing out.
Yeah, we were telling before we were speaking of I was so ill at a presentation. Mohammed Yunus was the guest and I was introducing him. And I was so ill, I almost passed out in front of 600 people and a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And I was squeezing the podium so hard. And one of my friends came up to me after and said, "That was a fabulous dramatic pause that you put into your speech." And I'm thinking to myself, no, I almost passed out.
You got to love it. Kept
So
going
ill.
through it.
Oh, I was so ill. It was ridiculous. Another area that I would suggest that I don't think you hear an awful lot. If you speak enough, it's not if you make a mistake, it's when you make a mistake.
Right.
But if you make a mistake, don't apologize. Just move forward because the audience really doesn't notice nor really care that you made a mistake. And by apologizing, you're just bringing attention to the mistake.
Right.
Also, if you get I don't know a better way to frame it, but a brain fart in the middle of your talk, which happens to us all, that 3 or 4 seconds seems like an eternity to you. Yep. The audience barely even notices it. Just compose yourself and then move forward. Don't even address it. So ignore any mistake.
I think that's a big one. Take the time that's necessary. I feel like people sometimes try and rush into it and start filling that 3 or 4 seconds, which turns into 10 seconds worth of verbal vomit. Instead, they could have just composed themselves, taken a second, and started again cleanly.
I would also suggest avoid going off on tangents, which is very hard for me to do.
Right. I think it's hard for anyone to do, especially when they're nervous.
My mind starts chasing the pretty butterflies and I'll start going off on tangents that I forgot where I was and I have a hard time getting back there. So I try to discipline myself not to go off on tangents.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more.
The last thing I would say is engage the audience if you can, but don't ask them a question unless you absolutely know the answer to the question, similar to a lawyer in a trial case.
Sure.
Even by engaging, you can use body language. What I do is I split the audience up into 3 parts and I scan. I look to my right as I'm talking, then I'll move to the middle, then I move to the left, and I look over their heads. I've spoken in an audience of 1,000 people, and I've had people after say, "You kept looking at me," and they were paying attention because they thought I was looking at them. And from the audience, by using that technique, they actually think you're looking directly at them.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have heard look above everyone's heads, but breaking it up into 3 segments is a cool way of making it feel like each person is getting that attention.
Yeah, and if you lock to a podium, I just do it with my head. If I can wander the stage, if I have a mobile mic, I'll wander to the right side of the stage, the middle, and the left. And very casually in a spot, then move over as I'm talking. So you're engaging the entire audience by using that technique.
Visually, that's also a key because you're moving. So it's making a visual cue interesting as well as the audio cues you're getting.
Absolutely. You don't want them falling asleep out there.
Shorten your speeches.
Get to the point.
Yep. Everyone's listened to a speech that's too long, no matter what the content is. The only thing I'll add is practice is key. So there's lots of local organizations that give you the opportunity to practice if you really are nervous about something. I've attended Toastmasters on many occasions. Most cities around the US in particular, and some international, have Toastmasters. If they don't, look up your local speech organization. I'm sure there's something where someone will at least sit down and listen to you. And they'll be a stranger, which I think is a key.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you do it, the more comfortable you become.
That's right. And especially in those organizations, you get to watch lots of amazing speech givers. So picking up on nuances that they're doing and implementing that in your own speech can go a long way.
Sounds good.
Great talking to you today.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. You have a good day.
Thanks for listening to our Favorite Tools for Entrepreneurs podcast. As always, you can head over to ProfSpirit.com to check out more resources and courses designed for you, the entrepreneur. Please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and others to get the most up-to-date information as it is released.